Oh, you filled my glass.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Oh, come on. There's no reason we can't be civil about this.
I'm sure there are some reasons.
Anyways, so we are doing what do we call this, obligatory episode for YouTube shows, or?
I just don't like that word obligatory because we're not obligated to do jack.
Yeah, we're doing what the hell we want, and because we want to, we are doing a games you probably have not played episode.
And we had to set a parameter for this.
Yes.
For our own good.
Essentially speaking, any system counts. It doesn't have to be... We're not saying these are our top whatever games of all time. These are simply games that deserve a little more attention to or have some redeeming factor.
Yeah.
That kind of, and just to...
And, sorry, but in tying with arguments that I've made in the past, at least for the games that I'm going to talk about, I'm not picking them because they hold a special place in my heart. Some of them are just great stories that are worth experiencing. Some of them are solid games. Some of them are both.
Absolutely. And, I think there's a couple of games that I have on my list that I'm going to specifically tell you, ignore this fact, ignore this fact, ignore this fact, which I know when you say ignore 3 things, it starts getting a little silly, but if that's 3 out of 10 things, so you got 7 things which are really damn solid, it might be worth another look. But anyways, yes, back onto that parameter. As we know, Joe here likes mentioning the 3DS RPG, Bravely Default, which is probably one of the best RPGs to come out of Japan for quite some time, if not the best thing just to come out of Square Enix for quite some time. They've been doing a little bit of a weird social media dance. But anyways,
I wouldn't even mind calling it a modern masterpiece.
Exactly, but the point is, because it is such a well-publicized, well-known, and just everything game, it's probably one you've played. If you are a JRPG fan, you've probably played it. And because of that, to keep things fair, if he mentions it this episode, I will hit him with the very suitcase we use for the opening sequence. Because you probably played it, so it doesn't count.
Well, if you're ready, today's episode is games that are as good as Bravely Default that maybe you haven't played yet. Move, scumbag.
Okay, then. Well, let's start with RPGs anyways. On the DS, we have Radiant Historia.
Oh, do we want to do system by system?
Well, I'm sticking... No, we shouldn't do this.
I don't think we should do that.
Whatever the hell we feel like. I'm just saying it's on the DS. On the DS, there was an RPG called Radiant Historia. And it was an RPG about time travel. It was in the fantasy world, and you had a book which essentially lets you go backwards and forwards in time. So you'd go back, change an event, then go forward and see what the event changes. Yada. It had this whole branching system so you could see where all the effects were. I think the best way to describe the mechanic is by actually doing what 2 of the elf-like characters or fairy characters in the game do. I don't want to really reveal what they are. And it's that don't treat every choice as if it doesn't matter. Simply do not treat a particular outcome as final. So it had some pretty solid fighting mechanics, some good storylines, and imagine if you're playing a game like Mass Effect and you had the ability to go back and change whether or not you were friendly to this guy, or whether or not you punched him out the window, or do something like that, and see what happens.
Well, I don't know. Good point, but I think with Mass Effect, part of what made that game so appealing was you made a choice, you had to stick with it. So knowing that you can go back in time and do something else does impact the dramatic tension of what's going on. Not to say that this game doesn't...
Well, 2 different feels.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, and that is a dramatic, important thing. They could stand there just, trying to figure out what exactly you want, but this is a game that, again, just allows you to go back and forth along a story, and going back to the 2 fairy characters, don't treat your decisions as if they don't matter, merely do not treat a particular outcome as destiny.
Right on. Maybe we should also do a thing where, you can gesture to me when it's my turn. Okay, so first game I want to talk about is a Wii U game, and technically all Wii U games are games you haven't played yet, because no one has a Wii U. But I was a huge fan of Beautiful Joe when it first came out on the GameCube.
Definitely.
And those guys, they not only know how to make a game that's beautiful, but also a game that has a strong character and strong tone and rock solid gameplay, and they've done it again with the wonderful 101. And for those of you who've never heard of this game or seen it, definitely worth checking out. And if you have a Wii U, it's a no-brainer. This is a game that you absolutely have to pick up, especially because Nintendo gets flack oftentimes for not coming out with anything original, using the same characters for the past 20 years. Because, there haven't been 5 Halo games in the span of about 10 years, but we'll
we're using
that.
every character except Samus.
Yeah. Not that people are always happy about seeing her when it's not done right. I, for one, liked the other M, but we'll talk about that later. So what makes the wonderful...
we will.
We will. What makes the wonderful 101 work is that it manages to use the tablet in a justifiable sense. It's not like a game where they developed it for another system, threw it onto the Wii U, and came up with a couple of neat gimmicky ideas to round out the package. This was
pretty much every other third-party thing on the Wii U.
Kinda. This is a game that was built ground up for the Wii U. And essentially, you control one character, and if you're familiar with Pikmin, it shares some stuff in common because there's you, and then there's a group of up to 100 other heroes following you around, and you can send them flying at their enemy, and they'll actually latch on and start punching it. And if it's somebody that's of equal size, and two start punching each other. So earlier on in some of the beginning levels, you just have these waves of singular units coming after you, and you throw your guys onto it, and it just breaks out into this brawl in the streets, and it's hysterical. But that's not where your true powers come in, because these guys can unite and morph into different objects like a giant fist or sword or a whip. And you do have to draw it on the tablet. So you make like a circle you do circle for the fist, you do the S for whip, etc., etc. And depending on how many of these units that you have, the more of them that go into the weapon, the stronger the weapon gets. So you might have this little rinky-dink sword that's just one guy, or you can have a 100-man sword that cleaves the entire screen. And it is hard. I'm playing it on normal, and I'm getting my ass kicked almost every level because these enemies have difficult patterns to read. They're unpredictable. They have a lot of different moves, and it will challenge you. And I'm not even on the hardest difficulties yet.
Wow.
So, great game. Definitely one that you got to check out.
All right. I think the next one I want to bring up is Nier. Nier, N-E-I, and is I before E except after C? Nier. Nier. It was released by Square Enix a while ago to somewhat mixed reviews. It's sort of interesting because you look at the original prototype for it. It was a typical JRPG. You had a very svelte main male character, with the typical Square Enix hair, that kind of stuff, and even all the NPCs look like they belong in that universe. But for the sake of appealing to...
but ironically, there's no typical Square Enix hair. It's always just typically atypical. It's always something different.
Okay, but in order to appeal to the overseas audience, they made him look like an actual 40-year-old or possibly just grizzled 35-year-old, I've been through wars kind of thing. It has a great sort of aesthetic to it. It's the world we know was kind of destroyed or ended a very long time ago. There's one particular field you can go into which looks like a perfect field, and you've got these little struts which once upon a time probably held a subway system, and there's barely any of it left to the point where if we didn't know what a subway system was, the locals would have no idea what the heck this thing is. And the writing is nice. It's very sort of... It's got to be lighthearted. You have a daughter, and she's sick, and you're trying to quest to cure her, and on the course of very early, you get this living book called Vice. There's a lot of weird pronounced names in here. But you get this living work, the White Grimoire, a living book, the White Grimoire. It gives you all your magical powers, and it actually makes for the perfect foil. How everyone sort of endears himself to Navi, this little floating fairy? This book gives you the power to manifest fists that punch people, summon homing dark lances that, towards the end of the game, act like a strategic missile strike on any target. You stop time, aim these things, and just blast out pieces.
It doesn't happen to have the infrared video footage where the bomb is coming in from above and it's zeroing it? No? Okay.
No. There's a couple of interesting problems with it. The first one is that very early on, they throw side quests at you that you can't beat. One of the early quests in it is, there's this rampaging boar. Go kill that boar. I went to face the boar. He did one charge attack at me, which I tried to evade. I actually hit the evasion thing, but he turned when I evaded, and he took off about 80% of my health in that one charge attack. And I tried attacking him back. You can't get close to him because he knocks you. It was a matter of, shit, I'm kind of out of the gate. I just acquired Vice. I just, got going. And I can't touch this thing. And that kind of frustrated me, because that ended up killing me, and, nothing else had really killed me up to that point, and then so whatever, I ignored him this time, went to a village, did some quests, came back, and there's this large monster which is just on the way. I mean, I guess I could just run past him, but hey, this large monster was not here before. Alright, Dark Lance, fire! That was barely any damage! So I ended up running around trying to Dark Blast him, which is the lesser version of Lance, yada yada yada, and then he swipes and he one-hit kills me, and that caused me to put the game down for a while, because, again, the game was shoving challenges at me, like, oh, here's a little side quest, here's a little tempting thing to do, and you're in no position to take it on. And I kind of felt like that meant they expect me either to spend 30 minutes firing off the weekend Dark Blast at it until it finally keels over out of sympathy, or just it's putting all these things on my quest book that I just can't do for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah, monster power should always increase relative to how close you are to a safe zone, because if you have these superpowered creatures and they're roaming just outside the city gates, why has this monster not just torn everything apart and killed everyone?
I don't know. I mentioned Vice before, and the supporting cast really carries this game pretty much primarily. Vice is a very self-important book. He likes it when people recognize him. The main character couldn't care less, and even thought about using him as Tindling at one point. And he has great responses. You accept a quest, for example, to go fetch mutton, and the Vice says, "Please tell me when you're not going to use my magic power to hunt sheep." As these people need food. We should be, lucky that they're giving us, money to help do. He's a nice foil. He's a nice sort of very rational person. There's one part where the main character, you get to name the main character, so whatever. The main character's even doing they're attacking us! Yes, so perhaps you should use magic to fight them off. You're right, I should use magic! Well, can I offer another piece of advice? What is it? Can you please not yell out every revelation as soon as you come to it like an idiot? And it's a fun mechanic between the two, and your daughter props up a lot during some loading screens. You'll see pages from her journal where she'll say, I'm going to make a secret recipe for Dad, and other loading screens you'll see sort of silhouette of her waving at you, so it's the world that really gets you in. The main character is a bit of an idiot, but he means well. Vice acts as your voice in the game, and he's very nice, because he and the main character don't get along, but other people are oh, it's the White Grimoire, and so yeah, it's definitely worth another look, and your turn.
Alright, so onto the Nintendo DS. I mentioned other Wii U games, but there's also not very many out right now. But there was a great game that I played on the DS, much longer than I thought I was going to play it. I thought it was going to be something that I played for maybe a day or two and then not bother with anymore, but it was something that I kept coming back to try to get better at, and it's called the Elite Beat Agents. Now, they made this originally in Japan, and I believe it was Osu...
Something in Japanese.
Something in Japanese, and it was these male cheerleaders in kimonos and
high school outfits.
Or high school outfits, and you would have a song that would be playing while someone is in a situation where they don't directly need help, but they do need someone to motivate them to succeed properly. And the mechanic was all touchscreen based, so numbers would appear on the screen like a 1, a 2, a 3, and then the ring would enclose onto it, and you had to tap it at the right moment to get the point. And if you didn't tap it at the right moment, then your characters would actually fall over, and it would throw off your rhythm, and your meter would deplete. And if the meter ran out, then you lost the level. And because it's a rhythm game, the tapping would be in line with the music, so it did reward you for actually listening to it and getting into the song and feeling the tempo, which is always great when a rhythm game actually makes you feel like listening to the song helps you and you're not even focusing on it. Because some of the problems I've had with, say, Guitar Hero is that, yeah, I'm listening to a great song, yeah, I know the song, yeah, I do kind of feel it, but the song isn't dictating my play. I'm just focusing on pressing the buttons and fretting the guitar. There's too much hand coordination for me to have sort of an emotional or psychological connection with the song.
Not to mention with Elite Beat Agents, it was based on the song itself, where, for example, like Guitar Hero, most of the strums and procs are based on the instrumental, not the singing.
Yes, that's true. Yes. One of the things that made Elite Beat Agents great is that they made this an Americanized version of the Japanese game so that it wouldn't be too weird for people. And Elite Beat Agents is still too weird for most people. Like, I was in college in a writing performing program, and I would show this to people, and these are some of those open-minded people that I've met, and they're like, "Whoa, Joe, seriously, this is why you're still a virgin." And I'm just like, "Well, why are you guys so mean for? What the hell?" This is getting personal. But aside from that, my only criticism of the game was one of the mechanics involved a spin wheel, which you would place the stylus on, and you would have to spin it fast. Now, I don't think that was a badly designed mechanic, but it was too hard to get it done on the later difficulties. And I don't know if there was just some exploit that I was missing out on, but I spun so fast and so often that the screen was scratching up as a result. And I had protective screen on it. Like, I took care of the thing.
That feature, I remember, annoyed a lot of other people.
Yeah.
I think in some design document that was just for bonus points, so if you want to just put your hand down, take a breather, but then it became an actual requirement. You have to do this, I know, you failed the mission! Yeah. The aliens have invaded!
He's not exaggerating, that is a story. Nintendo also has a repulsion when it comes to using the actual songs. Both in this and in their other rhythm game that I know of, Donkey Konga, it's songs that we know that we've heard on the radio, etc. But it's recorded by somebody else. And you know what? Overall, a lot of the recordings in Elite Beat Agents were pretty good. I wouldn't say better than the originals, but there are a few ones that come pretty damn close.
I would like to say I like the Elite Beat Agent version of Jumping Jack Flash because it's faster.
Yeah.
Like, part of the original Jumping Jack Flash was this huge lung capacity where you just hold a note for an incredibly long period of time, where Jumping Jack Flash for Elite Beat Agent. So it's like, let's go.
Yeah, and you know what? They build into the song well, too. You get this whole kind of like going up the roller coaster thing with it. Yeah, it was great. And an example of using the songs as part of the story and as part of the gameplay. If you can find it, as with every game that we're suggesting, totally worth it.
Yeah. And, the Japanese, I believe the DS is actually completely region-free.
I know the 3DS isn't. I don't know about the DS. I doubt it is.
I think the DS just didn't have region locking on it at all. But, look up the Japanese ones, too, because same thing. They've actually got, I think, one of the songs from Full Metal Alchemist, which makes everyone go, oh, crazy, it's the song from Full Metal Alchemist.
And there are versions you can play of it on the PC if you want to just see how the game works first. It wouldn't specifically be Elite Beat Agents, but it would give you an opportunity to use your mouse, or maybe even a Wacom tablet if you're... I tried using a Wacom tablet to play Diablo 1 once. It didn't work terribly.
I imagine it worked better for touchscreen. Anyways, I guess all right. Next one I want to recommend, Sanctum 2, which actually is a game I would rate as one of my personal favorites. It's a tower defense game, and tower defense is a very strange genre. I mean, on paper, okay, so all these guys are going to attack us. But that's okay, because they're going to wait for 10 or so minutes while we build some towers to shoot at them. It's a hard pitch. Not to mention the original tower defense genre came forth from World of Warcraft. No, not regular Warcraft mods.
Yeah.
You have to really force yourself to remember once upon a time there was a Warcraft before there was a World of Warcraft. They need a Warcraft game. But it's a really fun one. During the build phases, you actually get to build the maze, which I think differentiates it from virtually any other tower defense game I could think of, at least off the top of my head. So there'd be an entire grid map. There'd often be obstacles or bridges or things that exist in the environment, and you could actually summon down blocks to create whatever maze you want. And this created a very nice sense of progress, because every time I played a level, I'd think like, okay, what if I do this with the pathing? What if I do this with the pathing? I remember the first level in the original Sanctum was one of my favorites, because all of a sudden I had this revelation of, oh my god, I can shove them here, and if I do this, I can actually take them to the very end, but then gate off what they're supposed to do, and make them essentially run the course a second time before they're able to get to the core.
Yeah, what makes tower defenses great is that the way to beat it isn't set in stone. You as a player have a lot of variables that you can work with to come up with your own best version of the maze. Exactly. And you can take ideas from other people if you want to and apply them to your own, and that's encouraged. But the developers are giving you the grid, and they're giving you the assets, and they're telling you to go nuts.
Exactly. The second game had some improvements, improvements, adventures, what do I want to call them? Not so good things, and a couple of stuff that just was a different
Departures?
style. Departures.
Yeah.
That's it. And just a couple things that had different styles. Like in the first game, one of the annoying things, we had to build teleport elevators because you couldn't jump over your blocks, and you need to be able to jump around the map at will. Second game, the bigger maps have jump pads. You can just jump on them to go around, and everything is short enough that you can just jump over it of your own volition. So those were two amazing things. They also buffed every tower in the game. In the first game, you had to pretty much line up, create a whole line of Gatling guns in order to do something. In this game, one Gatling gun does a fucking fantastic job, which is good because you have a 15 tower limit now. There's a lot of changes, a lot of good things. I would definitely say it's number 2 is the superior one. It has a sort of better online play. It's got selectable characters. You can actually equip passives that change how you work. Very few of the passives affect the towers, unfortunately. I would have liked some of that myself. And it's a very nice tactical game, which again, every time you play a level, like you just do it a little bit more efficient, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more efficient. Maybe bring a thumper tower this time because you know there's not going to be a lot of air enemies. Maybe bring some sniper towers because you can position them here and they can cover the whole map. Maybe maybe cluster all your towers together and put one booster to make them all more powerful. The thing that really kicks me in the groin for this game is that they added a progression system. So you get experience to unlock new towers, new passives, and new secondary guns. And a few too many of the secondary guns are just variants on assault rifles, which, some of them are cool, some of them aren't. The SMG is crap. Anyone who buys that game is going to get to a certain level. It's like, hey, it's the SMG. No, it's crap. It is total crap. There is nothing redeeming about the SMG.
Oh, but I gave it a rare candy and everything. It's still not good?
It's crap.
Oh.
So, but beyond that, I think it's a fantastic game. Again, it's a matter of you get a little bit better. Like, so even if you play with your friends and you're all the way all the way at the beginning, how can I make this just a little bit better? And it feels so rewarding when you figure it out. And every time I fail that game, most times I fail. Sometimes I'm frustrated, but most times I fail the game. It's a matter of how can I do that better? And very few games challenge me to do that.
Okay, so this game was updated, and it is on the Xbox. Pretty sure it's 360. Could be on Xbox One. Same with the PS3. Pretty sure it's a PS3, Xbox 360 HD update. Originally, it was released on the GameCube, PC, PS2, and Xbox, so accessibility is not a problem. Beyond Good and Evil.
Yes.
Published by Ubisoft.
Thank you.
It's by Michel Ancel, same guy known for the Rayman series. This was the year where I was subscribing to GMR, and this is where I really got into following games as a business, as an industry, because I felt like I was accessing information that not a lot of people had. And every issue, for about 4 issues in a row, someone somewhere would say, "Why are you not playing this game? We're looking at you, Nintendo fans. You're the ones that are always complaining about not having any games. Well, this game comes out and nobody buys it. Now it's like $5, which is actually how much I picked it up for."
Holy
At that time, I only had so much money, and so I would have to, put that money aside for games that I really wanted. And it wasn't that I didn't want to play this game, it's just I didn't understand why it was so important to play this game. And you don't know that until you play it for yourself. I think when you're watching a game that sells you on the gameplay, you just need to watch somebody play the game and go, yeah, that game is for me. With the story, you don't even know if you like the story until the story's done. I mean, oftentimes you can like the way a story begins, but then it gets to the end and it changed in such a way that you're not happy about, and you walk away with an unpleasant feeling towards it.
Mass Effect 2.
Yeah. But even if you don't like the story, you have to acknowledge how well a story can be told. And Beyond Good and Evil, I still think, is one of the best stories that I've ever been told in a game. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty much trying to do what Zelda did. You go on an adventure, you go into dungeon-like areas or temples, although you don't actually go into a temple. Probably find some sort of useful object or upgrade, and you fight your way, solve some puzzles, get to a boss, and that will trigger something in the story. And there's an overworld. Instead of riding around in a field, you get to drive around on a hovercraft, which is something that you get to upgrade over the course of the game so
That's
that
cool.
It gains additional powers. And then you also get a spaceship later on. I'm not going to say anything more about that because it's kind of a spoiler. Now, what makes the story great is that the big twist isn't all that surprising. You kind of sort of see it coming. And I think they could have done a little bit more on making the character seem naive so that when the twists are revealed, she's a little bit more surprised. But instead, what they went with was a character that's initially very intelligent and doesn't immediately buy into somebody's BS. And her relative, or her Uncle Paige, who's a pig for some reason,
Let's not look into that.
because Michelle Ancel is even less convinced that the Alpha sections, their so-called protectors, are actually doing anything. And the story is you set out to try to expose the reality of what's going on to your people and ultimately overthrow them. There is something that you'll see in adventure games where your menu screen will have a lot of empty spots, and you get an idea of how long your game is going to be based on how hard it was to fill one aspect of the spot. Like, say you have to collect 7 gems, and the first gem took you 5 hours. Well, you have an idea of how long these other gems might take. And they did that in Beyond Good and Evil with these pearls. You would go through an entire dungeon, and you would find a single pearl. And some of the upgrades cost you so many of these pearls, you're looking forward to it. It's like, oh man, there's going to be hundreds of these pearls. But then, the further you get into the game, they start handing you the pearls like they're free giveaways at the exhibition.
You got today. I'm a pearl.
And she trips and unearths an anthill, and just a bunch of pearls start spilling out. And hey, what's in this dumpster? And then the dumpster falls over, and there's just pearls everywhere. It's like, why are these so precious? Like, honestly, one time I opened up like one box and I got 30 pearls. It devalued those first few pearls that I got. Yeah. But
if anything, it'd work better doing it the other way around, because then you have the ability to buy your initial upgrades, but then upgrading them or getting some additional stuff, like rounding out your character to learn everything would be harder.
I mean, that can even work for the story as well, because as the story is going on and things are getting more tense and pearls are becoming harder to find, you start to realize that the ones that you do find are more precious because you are still going to need these things, and people are like hoarding them or collecting them, and you have to, I don't know, Skyrim, break into somebody's house, steal their pearls. It could work. But overall, great story, pretty good gameplay, not that long, but I find shorter games with a lot of concentrated content are worth playing a couple of times to re-experience it and kind of break down what made it so good or why you enjoyed it so much. And there is supposed to be a sequel. We've seen footage. It's been discussed. I think they're working on it finally. I don't know.
Before or after Half-Life 3?
That's a tough one. I'm going to say before. Because Half-Life 3 is never coming.
Later this very same decade.
Can I just make a small prediction, completely off topic?
Sure.
Valve is not going to do any promotion for Half-Life 3 whatsoever. One day you're going to log on to Steam, and you're just going to see the number 3. And it's not only going to be Half-Life 3, but it's going to be Portal 3, Team Fortress 3, Left 4 Dead 3, maybe Dota 3. Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, have you heard the latest data mine on that?
That their Source 2 engine just came out, and now
Dota's been running it running the prototype.
Well, I think if they were to do a Dota 3 game, it wouldn't be the same kind of Dota. It would probably be a controller-based game where it's more about the combat and actually playing the heroes and less about the strategy. So it would have to be two kinds of gameplay for it to work.
Yeah. Okay. So
that's it.
All right. Next one I'm going to say Santa no Robo. Another DS game. You've been naming a lot of them. This one came out really late in the DS's life, so I think maybe 3DS maybe been out.
3DS's? Is that so unit of measurement?
So the 3DS may have been out at the time, because there were a few stragglers in the DS.
Holy shit, this episode has already gone on for 8 desus. Okay, I'll stop.
But yeah, coming off my stride. It was a very good game. It came out to sort of average reviews. the thing I thought was amazing about it, it really was the missing link between the 2DS and the 3DS, or rather the regular DS, because the 2DS is actually a 3DS without the 3D effect, making it a... So,
oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
But anyway, it had a fully traversable 3D environment. You could pick up objects and throw them around. You, again, could move in all directions, you could jump up, and to an extent, a lot of the areas were ultimately very linear, but they also were very well done, they looked nice. In fact, every aspect of this game was fantastic. There was a flying minigame, which you could, if you really liked it, grind it for extra money. There was a battle arena thing. You like it, grind it for extra money. Like, there was so many ways to get the extra rings in the game for buying things. Each one in itself was, again, a minigame. There was the stacking one, the destroy objects one, and whichever one you liked, you just stay there for a few minutes and get a bunch of coins. I think the only real problem I have with it is that the best gear in the game is only obtainable by using the fishing minigame, which I think, okay, so you've just devalued my entire wallet here because now I need to go fishing in order to get essentially the best upgrades. The upgrades to the game, in fact, were playing Tetris. You'd have a grid and you'd have to put on the various Tetris pieces on it. Each one will say, like, damage plus whatever, health plus whatever. So it made for a nice way to customize it. You could open up new spaces to fit in more Tetris pieces. And the plot itself was very great. It was a decent length game. And then it ended, and then I started up again. It's like, oh, here's a new opening. Here's a new menu screen. Here's a new... It's like, wait, it's still going? Mm-hmm. So, like, there's a decent length game in there, and then there's part 2, which is mostly revisiting the old places, but an entirely new story. Part 2 does take up a couple of RPG cliches, and I kind of wish it didn't, but whatever. The only thing a lot of people commented on, apparently this cost its score on several sites, was that it stars furries. It is a game about cat and dog furries. And why is this detrimental? I get that there's a whole subgroup out there that get turned on about whatever. I play Guild Wars 2 and I've got 2 Char characters. That doesn't make me a furry. The Char are an awesome race and they just happen to be horned cat people. And, this game has so many good merits in the fact that a lot of people that reviewed it said, like, oh, if you can stand the fact that there's furries, or, if you're okay with the furry thing, this should not
It's an easy target. Yeah, I mean, if you want to cater a favor with your less open-minded fan base, no disrespect to people who don't like furries, but it is an easy place to mine for humor if you have to.
Yeah, but
I mean, I don't go in for it, but I get it.
I don't think it should be affecting your opinion of the game. Furries are okay with me. They're not. I don't especially like them. I don't especially hate them. I think most of the reason why I like the Char in Guild Wars 2 is because if you actually read the history, this is a race that's had to reinvent themselves several times over just to survive, and there's a lot of really cool stuff there, and that's one of the reasons I like it. But anyways, this game is...
I want to talk about furry psychology.
I'm up for that episode.
Yeah, we'll do it later, but...
Okay, but, it deserves to be judged on its merits. It's technically impressive. Gameplay-wise, it's fun. Towards the end, it does get a bit repetitive, but most of the repetition comes from side quests. You don't have to do side quests. And it's an overall great experience. And it came out too late in the DS's life, too early in the 3DS's life, and again, a lot of people just demerited it based on furries. I can remind you, during the 90s, there were furries everywhere. They were everywhere. And by the way, Captain Fox, furry. Crystal, furry.
I was thinking of Star Fox. It's funny, like, hey, if you make a good enough game, we can excuse the anthropomorphic creatures.
I don't think it should be an excuse. I think, it's there. It's what they decide to go with.
Yeah. You keep that thing away from me. Okay, so this one wasn't actually planned, but I thought I'd bring it up anyways. I follow Red Letter Media. I love their stuff, and their show previously recorded an episode about is the original Sonic the Hedgehog overrated? And
no spin dash.
You gotta watch the episodes to fully get what the point they're trying to make is. But the gist of it is what made Sonic appealing was he was such a counter Mario character. Sonic was a rebel, and he goes incredibly fast. But then you would play the Sonic game, and you would try to go fast, and the game would punish you every few seconds for doing it, whether you ran into a spike trap, or you didn't make the jump because you were going too fast, or an enemy would just appear and he would kill you or make you lose all your rings. It seemed that just everything that they did was counterintuitive for what Sonic is supposed to actually do. And that problem still arises in almost every Sonic game, even now. I mean, Sonic Generations, I enjoyed overall. I thought it was pretty good, if not spectacular. But I'm gonna say if you haven't, or if you don't think there are any good Sonic games, or if you're not a Sonic fan, Sonic Rush on the DS, I will say is the best Sonic game that I've played. And it's mostly the same. You run fast, get to the end of the level before time runs out. Try not to get killed or drown, because that happens. But they add the boost mechanic, which allows you to press a button, and then Sonic goes into a blue fireball rocket mode.
He instantly gets full speed.
Yeah, not only do you get full speed, but it also serves as an attack function, so that if a monster is standing in your way, you charge at him. You don't lose any momentum. You don't have to go into a roll. You don't have to jump and do a homing attack. You just you send him away, and then you keep running. If you don't know is there is a little tiny bit of reaction time. It would be nice if maybe there was a little bit more, but now you know he's there. You're going to get it on your next run, no problem. And most times you should be able to react reasonably quickly enough. You do have to manage your expectations a little bit when you're playing a Sonic game. But yeah, the boost mechanic is one of the best things that they've ever introduced into Sonic, and they still use it in other Sonic games, and it perfectly allows him to do what it is he's supposed to do. So if you're just interested in seeing how to take a character with a lot of problems and solve them, Sonic Rush is great.
Yeah, I would like to say I was not a fan of Eggman Nega or whatever from the alternate timeline, but they introduced Blaze in that game, and I thought she's a very interesting character because she's essentially another really fast character that they include in party games and just generally speaking, who isn't broody Shadow. And besides, Shadow is sort of a bad guy or an anti-hero. So here you have Blaze, a very formal, very disciplined, good guy who can keep up with Sonic.
Yeah.
Like, I think Sonic might still be faster than her, but she can at least stay in his wake.
Not every Sonic character has been well received. And it's too bad, because when they do come out with decent characters, it just feels like it's another one added onto the pile.
I feel like Knuckles has been abused a lot over the years. There's been some good examples, and then there's some examples of him just... They don't even say how he got tricked. Like, you were tricked by Eggman. Okay, can we know, how did Eggman trick him? I mean, he's been tricked by Eggman before, so what specifically did Eggman do this time that made him believe him this time?
And could he have at least talked to Sonic before he sent him down to Hydro City? That place was terrifying.
Yeah. The Finger of Doom.
Oh, sorry.
No. Alright, so did Historia, did Sanctum 2, did... oh yes! Definitely want to bring this one up. I'm sure a lot of people know what Shin Megami Tensei is.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it literally translates to Digital Devil Summoner. Don't shoot me! But essentially, it's been an ongoing franchise similar to Final Fantasy. They've had the main games, which they haven't touched for a long time. They have the Persona series, which uses the same mechanics and sort of takes place in the same universe. That's overlaps the original series. And they had another shoot-off called Devil Summoner, which was the series' first attempt to do a real-time Shin Megami Tensei game. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It took place in a very nice world. It was, I forget the exact year, but it was sort of a 1960s, 1970s Tokyo. So there was still the mysticism, there still was all that stuff, but there was also a very clear Western influence over the design of the buildings, the overall attire people wore, their general attitudes. It had a very interesting setting, and the idea was there still were demons in this world, so it kind of felt like the demons existing were almost a dying breath of Japanese culture amidst getting strangled by Western influence. And the real-time strategy was nice. You could only have one demon out at a time, as opposed to traditional you've got 5 demons out at a time, or it depends on what game there is. You could command them to do things. You could still stop the game to say you do this attack this way, you do this attack this way. And it was a great introduction to the Shin Megami Tensei series for me in general, because it was far more accessible than the turn-based ones. You get into the action immediately, you get going immediately. Every time you level up, you just get one skill point that goes into one stat, which on the one hand sounds really silly, but on the other hand, it really meant that leveling up wasn't this huge thing. It wasn't, this boss is 3 levels ahead of you. Well, okay, so that means you're missing 3 skill points? So it was like you could use your player skill to beat the game without having to go around and grind endlessly for levels. The demons you had accompanying you were nice. They all had their element before their name, though, so confused. Like, there's one called Jack Frost, and he's called Frost Jack Frost because he's a frost type. So there
was also like a fire Jack Frost.
No, that was Fire Pyro Jack.
Oh, okay. So the Jack is the constant. Interesting.
Well, there's the Jack brothers, which Jack Frost is the snowman. And then Pyro Jack is...
get into the...
Yeah, but point is that the demons all in the Shin Megami Tensei series, in general, are based on actual lore. This has sort of been ongoing all the way back to the first one. The designs are nice. They have kind of a cross between what they would actually look like and a bit of an anime slice to them. Like, not so much that's suffocating, but it had a good storyline. It had a lot of nice mechanics that you can definitely build upon. It has a New Game Plus mode, which I always find fun for RPGs. And it was very well done. It was a nice departure from the traditional Shin Megami formula. It took place in a nice world, and it had characters you liked, and even the main character being a silent protagonist was still this nice person represented by little bits of personality here and there, such as going into a bathhouse naked, because it's a bathhouse, yet still wearing his hat. Take him away, Johnny!
That might be against bathhouse code, just saying. Alright, so this is a game that I brought up a couple of times to reference as an example of game design. Super Nintendo game called Smash TV. I don't know how easy this is going to be to access. You might end up having to emulate it or buy a Super Nintendo and find the cartridge.
Pretty sure if they... I feel like there was either a re-release of that or someone did something that was so spiritually like I remember hearing that Smash TV thrown around very heavily not too long ago.
Yeah, well, that could have been me because I do mention it, and it is a great game. But you know what? Even if you do end up just playing it on the Super Nintendo, in a way, it'll actually help illustrate my point because of how well this game is made. So the story is, it's one of those Friday night gladiatorial futuristic arenas where people's deaths are being televised for others' entertainment, kind of Running Man-ish, but a little bit more upbeat, like American Gladiators. And you play a contestant on the game show, and you're there for... not to avenge the death of your parents. You're there for glory and prizes and money and booty and fame and all that good stuff.
That sounds like fantastic motivations.
Yeah. Now, that's as far as the story goes. Like, it's just there to set up this game. And I find that a game show is a great idea to make a game out of because contextually there's so much that the two have in common, but there are just certain things that you can't accomplish on a television show because you can't endanger people's lives. Well,
unless you can.
Well, I mean, within reason, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure no one ever actually would have died on Fear Factor. It's just psychological.
Although there have been a lot of damages being audience member of Oprah.
Somebody got burned on Survivor. Like, not burned because of a fractured alliance. I mean, like, literally burned. Like, his hand got burned by fire. He had to get helicoptered out. So, I mean, if something bad happened, you'd be rescued. No one wants to die on this show. It'd be terrible for PR. And, yeah. But, one of the things I really enjoyed about this game, aside from the gameplay, which is simple, immediately intense, immediately clear on what to do, is that not often do you see a multiplayer version of a game that feels like it's as well put together or as welcome as the single-player version. And actually, the two-player mode makes more sense than single-player mode because the idea of competing with another contestant on a game show makes more sense than just being a sole contestant. They both work, but two-player mode works just as well, if not better. And it's also a great balance because you're competing for score, you're competing for prizes, you're competing to pick up the best weapons, you're competing to get the most kills, but you're also cooperating because if these guys overwhelm one of you, then it's going to make it that much harder for the other guy to win. So it balances both fighting and working with somebody that you're playing with. and it's just much more enjoyable than when you pick up a game and there's a multiplayer mode that feels like an afterthought that doesn't tie into the rest of the game.
Mm.
Either they tried to establish its own sub-story, like, say, the Bioshock 2 multiplayer mode where you're playing the Civil War, or a just random map where a bunch of people run around and try to shoot each other, and
Yeah.
there's no context whatsoever. I mean, you don't need the context for it to be fun. Obviously, Mario Kart doesn't suffer for not having a story, but at least Mario Kart, you get what's going on. Everyone's getting together to drive around in cars and
Mhm.
throw shells at each other. That's as much as you need. So everything that they had to do for that game, they did perfectly. And the soundtrack is badass too. Like, in spite of the fact that you're using Super Nintendo technology, the music still hits the perfect mood for the game. Kind of ironic, kind of jovial, kind of sarcastic. Like, yeah, let's get everybody killed for fun, pleasure. You enjoy that, don't you?
And now, murder each other for my amusement.
That's the Stanley Parable announcer?
Yeah.
As a quick addendum, Stanley Parable, great game. You should play that too.
Yeah, lots of people heard of it though, so it doesn't quite make the list. Yes. Baton Callus Origins.
That's not how you say it. Do it again.
Baton Callus?
Okay, crap, I don't know it either. I'm going to say
I know it is
Baton Kaitos.
No, I'm pretty sure that in games someone called him Callus.
Okay, fine. I'm wrong.
Okay, but anyways, if I hadn't slapped on the last word here, it also won't qualify, because Baton Callus is on most people's top 10 greatest RPG lists of all time, and it was around the GameCube era.
You like RPGs.
Well, yes. Well, I think the reason why a lot of the RPGs have made this list as well is since their time investment, it's very easy to throw it away. Like, hey, I've invested a few hours in this game, and here's this side quest with a boar, and I can't beat it. Oh, the game is horrible, I'm going to throw it down. So it's really easy to just have a bad start and not really want to get at it. I'll definitely make sure to not name an RPG for the next one. But it sort of had the same problem as 2010. 2010, the year we made Contact, was a follow-up to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it was a great movie. The problem was, it was following a movie which essentially redefined how we thought about science fiction. So, Origins had the same problem. It was following, what is still to this day one of the greatest RPGs of all time. And it did so not very well. It changed the battle system, which I think caused rage in everybody. Like, oh, I'm going to pick it up. It's like, what the hell did you do to the battle system? It still uses cards, but uses them differently. You now can sort of just play a special attack whenever you want, but that ends your combo. So, again, you can either special attack, but that's all the damage you did the whole turn. It's better to attack 1, attack 2, attack 3. I don't have the energy for special attack anymore unless I overclock, and now I've got unlimited energy, yada yada. It had a lot of interesting mechanics in it, and it was overall a very nicely done game. The writing was good. I would not call it as great as Baton Callus, obviously, but it was definitely above average. It had a good enough story. It suffered from two major things. The original game was, one of the reasons it was fantastic is it threw out a lot of RPG tropes. Like, the main character was 19 years old. You had some older people in the party who weren't ancient, but still had good. Everyone had personality. There's a twist in it that I never saw it coming. I don't think anyone saw that coming. It's like, holy shit, you're building up to this, we all know what's coming, and then you just smack us across the face. And another interesting thing about it is that you existed. You, as the player, were a guardian spirit who was helping the main character. So, you would name it after you can name it after yourself, and yet the characters refer to you by your full name, and again, you existed. So the second game, unfortunately, re-embraced a couple of cliches, story-wise, technology is evil, this character turns out to be this person's kid. That's not really a spoiler, come on, it was so obvious. And, all these things. It also created a problem because there's this one area in the first game they spend so much time getting to, but in the second game, it's like, oh yeah, we've got the most powerful ship in the Armada, just go down there. Perfectly fine. No problem.
Yeah, here's the keys.
It's like, what? Why wasn't this around in the original game? It would have made things so much easier. And there's also a bit of a time jumping back and forth mechanic, which was actually really good. the, I think, biggest problem that made the game really hard for me to swallow and made me really angry at it initially was they spend so much effort trying to reference the first game. You'll bump into, a character's father, obviously, because he has the same very unique hair. There's no way you didn't get that genetically. You'll meet lots of people from the first one. This one is this guy's daughter. This one is this person. There's the mysterious female character in the original party, and you don't really need to know where she came from because you know what she's doing. You know who she is a defined character. You don't need to know her origin story. And the fact they sort of try to wedge in her origin story in the prequel was pretty silly. And there was this fantastic moment in the original Baton Khalis where you're talking to the older member of the party and you're saying, like, so why did you stop being a knight? And he starts like, how old are you? 19. I'm not going to start explaining my life decisions to a 19-year-old. And I'm not doing it justice. Like, the way he said it sounded, I don't want to say fatherly, but it wasn't one of those, like, you're not going to get it. You're your tiny little kid. It was like, you're going to get older and you're going to understand that there's just things in life, and I wish I could tell you, but I can't. And it was a interesting little quiet moment for me. I liked it. In the second game, they reveal why that person wasn't a knight anymore. It's like, midichlorians! This is midichlorians all over fucking again. No one was asking! And you contaminated...
The lesson here is you need to give your players some times to use your imagination as to why characters did things a certain way. I mean, it's not like it's a crime to define the character and tell you everything about them, but if you want your players to be invested, or if you want your fans to be invested, you got to give them something to talk about, something to speculate, something to question and to wonder, and think, oh, could this be right? This be wrong? Just today I found out that Sheik is definitely a woman. Nintendo.
How did you not? It's Princess Zelda.
It's Princess Zelda, who could have magically transformed into a male character.
Okay,
that was the point.
Okay, I guess magic could have been involved. I thought you just found her. Well, it did seem to be a little. I feel like this is going to turn into a whole topic unto itself.
It could have been, but it's not anymore because Zelda turns into Sheik, who is definitely a woman.
Yes.
Case closed.
Yes. So if I were to I'm killing that joke before it ever makes it out of my mouth. And back to Baton Khalis' origins, it also kind of redefines what the origin of the main one of the bad guys was from the original. Well, redefines two of them, but in one case, it's like really messing with the lore, like taking like, oh, this is the lore from the first game, must have been written by a different person, and if taken on its own, and you just sort of glaze over every time it references the original game, you have a different but still solid fighting game mechanic. You have a decent plot with characters who are fun to listen to. They're not quite the people from the first one. It's a game that deserves merit. If you liked the first one, playing Origins is still a good game. It's still a very good game. It's tried to reference the first one way too much and screwed around with its lore, which I think are two serious crimes, but shouldn't really destroy it. Anyways, so, on to you, Sarah.
Alright, well, this is going to be the last one I'm going to do because we only got 7 minutes before we hit the hour mark.
Yeah.
I did not expect this game to hold up, but we had played it recently, and it was as good as I recall. Not better, because how could it possibly be better? There was just no way they made it better. There's no patches for a PS2 game at that time. Champions of Nora. Based off the Evercrest realm, it was a 4-player action RPG. You would pick from one of 5 classes, and you can either choose between male or boot carrier. And you immediately get into this pretty sizable conflict. You're in this elven territory, and the elves are fending off against the orcs. And first thing you do is you get into a battle, and there's people fighting all over the place. And overall, a lot of these games, you can tell their age mostly based off the way they look. This game still looks strong. It never had a particularly solid art direction. Obviously, they took cues from EverQuest because it's the same franchise and property and realm, but there isn't an artistic inspirational choice made. It doesn't feel like a painting or a comic book or even film. It just feels like these things are rendered as well as they could, and overall it still performed and looked pretty good. Which is funny to me because usually the games that I think still hold up are games that have strong artistic merit, like Wind Waker, for example, on the GameCube, Okami. These games, even World of Warcraft before they made updates to it. If you went back and played original vanilla, yeah, it would look dated, but you still got the strong sense of place and of tone and of setting, and that's what art conveys.
How do you notice the warrior? He's got ridiculously huge shoulder pads!
Only 10% less ridiculously oversized than the priest's shoulder pads. This is important information. You need to know this.
Yes.
You need to always know when to kill the priest in the fight, even if he's a shadow priest and he's not even a healer. Anyways. I don't have any more fun playing on Diablo 3 than I do playing this game. The skill progression is straightforward. The items come to you relatively quickly, and for a 4-player game, you need to have enough monsters on the field so that it feels like a legitimate challenge for all 4 players. And there's only so many monsters that you can have on screen before it starts to lag, and they handled it perfectly. Like, just the right amount of monsters, just the right amount of strength, just the right amount of tension, and you actually feel like the abilities that you cast have some power to them. Like, I played a cleric, and I would just rank up my Holy Bolt spell, and then just fire that off and take somebody's health. It cost a lot of mana to do it, so it was pretty well balanced, too. And yeah, not a hard game to play. There is a sequel to it as well. I would say play the original because the sequel does away with the story progression and it just takes you to a hub world where then you access different levels, which works for efficiency, but I think if you're trying to actually get the players to feel like their characters in the EverCrest world, then handing them a series of portals and saying go have fun is a bit counterproductive. But yeah, overall, I mean, if you can pick up that game, it's still fun to play, and it makes a lot of good choices.
Okay.
All right, last one.
All right.
You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay.
Well, go.
Okay. No.
Just do what you gotta
do one that's really quickly. Persona 4 Arena. It's not an RPG. It's a fighting game based on an RPG, and this.
Oh, damn! You got me on that one.
It's a bit of a weird one. I mean, some people, it's one of those cult things where people who love it really love it, but it never quite made it up there with Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter and that stuff. It's really interesting because 2 buttons control your character, and the other 2 buttons control your persona, which, if you actually play the Persona series, is basically a demon that represents your inner self, that kind of stuff. But because of this, you can have fights where you do something pretty much at the same time that your persona does. So you have 2 levels of combat going on at the same time. You can have whole bouts and whole back and forth consisting of just summoning these 2 things that then bash each other while your characters stand back waiting for an opening. So it's a really interesting fighting mechanic that way, and it's just one of those. It's a fighting game that just, again, people who like it love it. It's never really going to be up there, even with BlazBlue, another game that the fighting game of the same company made. But it's still really fun. I think it actually is getting a sequel, though. So apparently it was just popular enough to do that.
Right on.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
All right.
Well, I guess we should open up the comments on this one. If people want to mention games that are worth playing.
Please keep it relevance to this episode. Don't use this as your chance to vent comments you've been building up since episode 1. We will delete them.
That said, if you do actually want us to read something on the show, I will say email joe@giantenemycomic.com, and we may regret that in the coming days and weeks and months.
I'm gonna need so much booze.
I have a bottle of Crown Royal over there.
That sounds great.
I'm not even kidding.
Let's go.
Okay.